Day 34. Share your goals. Today's homeschool thought. Let your kids in on your goals for them. It's too easy to research, shop, plan, prepare, and then foist these ideas and activities on your kids. They have no context for the reasoning behind the new book or the special activity. Remember, they're smart. They can understand ideas like, I thought we'd try this approach because it is hands-on, or I got excited about poetry when I read this blog post. Want to hear it? Ask them what they wish they could plan for the year or month or day. Involve their research. What have they heard from friends, families, from their online buddies, from the books they read that sounds fun to try? Homeschool is not done to anyone. It's a journey of shared learning that ought to include all the members in a cooperative search for harmony and growth. Quote of the day. Exactly my thoughts, and you put it into words. Seriously, you're helping me in my quest to be a great writer and coach to my kids. Thanks. Anna Dirksen Friesen. Sustaining thought. Homeschooling feels less daunting when you approach it as a shared experience of shared goals. So this was a very brief day entry to get us back in the groove. And I do want to talk about it because it's something I'm passionate about. One of the things that happens a lot in homeschools is that the learning adventure of becoming a home educator is so compelling and consuming. Parents almost don't observe that they themselves are on a learning adventure. They see themselves as providing instruction to their kids, but they don't always see themselves as being a student. When you are a student, you go through a whole variety of experiences that you could actually tap into to help you with your children. For example, when you are doing research, how do you do it? Do you wait for someone to tell you the steps to take? Do you wait for someone to show you the preferred places to do the research and then the things that you don't need to look up? Does someone stop you from taking rabbit trails? Do you start with an outline of what you hope to discover or find? Do you even set a thesis for yourself? Do you start out saying, I am out to prove that Charlotte Mason is the preferred method of home education, when all you ever heard of it was the name of the woman and the fact that she's popular? Do you start out with a position about what's right and wrong before you've even done the research? I don't think so. Most homeschooling parents that I know embark on this journey with wide-eyed openness. Like, what will work? How will I know if it works? What are the basic practices that ensure a really good academic experience for my children? And then they go looking for those things and they follow rabbit trails, and way leads on to way. They click on a link, they read a discussion, they go reserve a book at the library and bring it home. They attend a conference or a convention. They come to my retreat. They watch Facebook Live. They join Facebook groups. And during this swirl of activity, there is no one superintending it. There's no one saying to you, well, get this done by Friday, will you? It's really important that you've concluded this by Friday. In fact, is there an endpoint to this journey of figuring out home education? When is it over? When do you know that you've got it figured out and now you can coast? When is that endpoint? I'll tell you when it is. When the last child leaves your house and chooses to do school away from home. And you know what that means? You're going to be solving the education dilemma for as many years as you have children. Because even the ones who may go off to public high school or junior high or whatever, you will have brought with you this incredible volume of information and understanding about what it takes to learn. And you're going to apply that to however they choose to be educated while they live under your roof, right? Or your roof. In other words, while you are learning about home education, you are actually a living, breathing model of what it takes to learn something. And what animates you? Well, a whole bunch of things. One, your sense of responsibility to your children. Two, the experience of doing something completely different than everybody else. I mean, homeschooling is its own kind of adventure. You're choosing to go against what everybody says is the right way to be educated. You are actually activating your political self when you choose to homeschool, because you are saying the state isn't responsible. I choose to take what was on the state's shoulders and put it on my shoulders. I'm going to do this thing that other people have studied and trained for, and maybe I have and maybe I haven't, but I believe that I can do this, and I'm going to learn as I go. That's pretty big. So first, you take it on because of responsibility. Second, because it offers you an adventure. And then thirdly, you keep going because the experience of learning is so compelling. You read books about history. You read books about art. You go to museums. You read literature that moves you to tears. You watch the lights come on for a pre-reader who suddenly reads. You read the writing your children do and you are moved by it. Suddenly, mathematics makes sense to you in your 30s in a way they never did when you were in your teens or when you were 10. So home education for you is a model of what it's like to be an active learner. So guess what? If you share your homeschooling goals with your kids from a perspective of being on a learning adventure, you are hitting two levels with them. One, you are actually modeling what it's like to be a passionate learner. And two, you are allowing them to contribute to your education. Isn't that wild? It sounds so backwards, right? But if you say, like, I did all this research, I was clicking on this one forum, and then I followed this link the lady posted about this handwriting book, and then I saw the pictures and I thought, God, they look really good. I don't even know if pictures have anything to do with the educational model, but I just knew I wanted to keep turning the pages. And so I thought, maybe I would buy this book. Come here. I want to show you this website. What do you think? Don't you think those are cool pictures? Does that seem interesting to you? Do you want to page through this website with me before I order it? And then when we order it, let's just see what happens. Let's play with it and find out if it's any good. Will you help me with that? You know, in the business, we call this R&D, research and development. Can you be on my R&D team? If you talk that way with your kids, that is so different than you secretly doing all the work of research behind their backs, right? Like in the wee hours of the night while they are peacefully sleeping. And then you click on your Amazon Prime account and hit, send or whatever, purchase. And 2 days later, the book shows up and your poor unsuspecting child just eating Cheerios suddenly has this book plopped down in front of them. And now they're suddenly supposed to be excited to use it. And all they knew is they were eating Cheerios, and now they're confronted with a completely new model of handwriting. And they're supposed to be excited about it. And yet they've had none of the anticipation or run-up to this book that you've had. You've been thinking about it, imagining it, thinking of what it would be like in your own house, how your child would hold the pencil differently, how there would be no tears, right? So as you embark on this homeschooling journey, don't forget to value it for the way that it gives you a partner in this learning journey with your kids. You are out there, not with a schedule, no deadlines, without the keyword outline, without a test coming, educating yourself. Educating yourself. Can't your kids learn in a similar way? What if you could send them even on their own education journey? What if your child became so obsessed with Minecraft and he knew he could invite you in the way you just invited him in? What if you said to him, hey, you seem really excited about Minecraft. I found this article while I was Googling, and I was reading about Minecraft. I don't really understand it. Could you read it with me so I understand better what you're doing? Because I'm kind of excited by how passionate you are about learning this platform. Looks really hard to me. Like that. You start showing your kids that the way you grow is expanding the resources that help you be good at your job, whether it's Minecraft or home education, whether it's poetry or learning to play lacrosse, whether it is Shakespeare or the Big Bang Theory. Whatever it is can be enriched by this excursion into learning. And you are the perfect model of all the things that you want your kids to be. You are living it right now. You are the living, breathing embodiment of what it means to be a passionate learner. I love to make this joke, and I may have said it even when I was just in the UK. Homeschooling parents are so into learning, they legit give up vacation time to attend conferences and conventions. Legit. Like, they take time out of their lives that they could spend in Paris or at a beach, and they come to a conference and they sit in a little room and listen to me talk. Like, that's how much fun learning is. That you would give up time in your life, in your vacation, to hang out in a convention where the four walls are gray. There are no windows to the outside world. There are no little shops to buy cute teapots and tea cozies. No, they'd rather take their hard-earned cash and thrill to the idea of a new handwriting book. I mean, seriously, if that is not passionate learning, I don't know what is. You have all of what it takes already going on inside of you to help yourself understand what's going on in your kids. And I know there are some subjects that you don't like researching as much as others. Isn't that true? There are some subjects you keep gravitating toward. Like perhaps you are gravitating toward, I don't know, home economics. You really love doing sewing and cooking and how to create this nurturing environment of the home, right? And then there are other subjects like maybe you just don't like ancient Greek history. And the pressure out there to study ancient Greek history is all around you. Well, which one do you wind up checking out on Pinterest more? The home ec stuff or Greek history? You're just like your kids. They're the same as you. They don't go and gravitate towards the subjects that don't interest them, that are harder for them to wrap their brains around. So once you see that, can't you be honest about it? Can't you? You can certainly say to your kids, this looks less interesting to me. And from what I know, there will be a day where if you want to become an engineer, it's important to have a working knowledge of math. So I keep noodling on it. I keep trying to think of ways to make it more interesting for you and for me. And so I welcome your help. If you find, a resource that you're excited about, I'd love to know about it. Here's how I'm researching math right now. This is what I'm doing. I'm going here. I signed up for this webinar. I am using this book. I'm talking with my best friend and I'm seeing what's working in her family. Like that. Have a conversation. Somebody's asking if I have a handwriting book. No, not specifically. We practice copywork and dictation in Brave Writer, and I am not a skilled, lettering artist. I don't know the theory behind lettering and lettering formation. I am an original writer originally, like a professional writer, so that's my bent. But if you get a handwriting book and you work with your kids to improve their handwriting, once they are comfortable using the pencil, then they're ready for what Brave Writer has. We have the arrow, the boomerang, the wand, all these products that are designed to engage the handwriting part of your child through copywork and dictation. And that's a great question, because what is Brave Writer? Brave Writer is built from the model of all the things I love. Like a lot of times people will ask me, well, how did you decide to create the wand? Or how did you stumble upon the arrow? Well, I didn't want to write a dry, dusty workbook. My goodness, that's not how I write as a professional writer. Nobody sits me down when I get an assignment for writing an article for a magazine and asks me to turn it in these weird stages, like the keyword outline and then a draft that they can run through and correct all my spelling and grammar. That's not what happens. They expect me to go do research and come up with what I want to say and explore the idea. And I wanted my students, my children, to have the same experience. We start with a big topic, and then we start looking for the parts of that topic that are interesting, and then we get some of those down on paper, and then we mess with them, we move them around and rearrange them and think about how to enhance and enrich them. And then we pull in a quote from an expert, and we go find out a theory that we hadn't known before, and we paraphrase it. And we move it all over the place. And sometimes the end, where our writing is finally flowing and we feel really comfortable, becomes the beginning, because it's the most interesting part that's going to draw the reader in. So I wrote a book like that, because to me, that's what I learned when I paid attention to my own writing experience. And I thought, well, if that's what I actually do to write, why would I then go write some other weird book about how you should write that I never do? Because that's not how writers write. They don't get a workbook with an assignment that's like this big block of text that tells them how many sentences and how many adverbs to add and when to move a certain kind of sentence to the top. That's not how people write. So I didn't want a book like that. I wanted a book that reflected what I saw as the writing process that most people go through, that I know who are natural, professional, confident writers. And I think that's how you want to approach all these subjects. How do people learn? How do you learn? How are you learning about home education right now? Trust your own model. What are you doing? What are you doing that's enriching your life? Now, Dixie is mentioning that she has kids who fight the workbook. Well, if your kids are fighting a certain model, imagine that you were using that model to teach yourself about home education. How would you feel if someone gave you a workbook and you had to work through and fill in blanks? You know, what is home education? And then there was a multiple choice. Is it home? Is it school? Is it subject studies? Is it character building? And you had to pick the top one based on whatever that curriculum person thought was the top priority. And then you picked one that made sense to you. You thought, well, home education is a place where we create a really dynamic connection in our family. And that option isn't even in the list of choices. And now you're stuck. You're like, well, what's the closest thing to that? Okay, I'm going to click that it's home. I'm going to pick that multiple choice answer. And then you flip to the back of the book where the key is, and it's like, nope, the number one thing is education. And then you feel like, what? That's unfair, because I have more to say about this than what was allowed in these little bubbles, in these multiple choices. I have more to say about it. There's a big joke in my family that I hate multiple choice tests because I actually do hate multiple choice tests. I was a history major in college. And one of the reasons I was a history major in college is because I got to write my opinions. I wasn't asked to make, A, B, C, D, E, F, G choices. And in fact, in Psychology 10, I wrote a fantastic paper and got an A, and I got a D on the multiple choice tests. You know why? Because my brain immediately goes to all those choices, and I think to myself, well, I can make cases for 5 out of 6 of these. And if you would give me a pen, I could go in and explain to you the thinking that I'm having right now as I'm reacting to each of these choices. Now, I'm not saying there isn't ever a moment in time where it might be fun to just take a multiple choice test. Don't hear me saying that they're all horrible. What I'm saying is, as a strategy for learning, they are assessment-based. They are not about learning. They are about showing how much you were able to understand the sort of orientation of the test creator to match their expectations. It does not allow you a lot of room for self-expression or exploration or explanation. And honestly, I don't want my medical staff to only be able to get answers right. I want them to be able to understand the choices they're making when they do surgery on my body that will never match a textbook. I want their thinking to be more lateral. I want them to be able to see what they're doing in my body and have other thoughts than there's only one right way. They have to know how to handle emergencies when they pop up, or know what to do when my body presents differently than how they anticipated seeing it, correct? So this is what I'm talking about, and you are living it right now. That's the thing. You are living this experience right now in all of the research you do about homeschool. And you can use that model of your own life and ask yourself, how does this look when my child is learning grammar? I'm going to give you another example because I think this is helpful. So I remember when I was first working with my kids and the whole notion of grammar came up. All kinds of parents were using different grammar programs. And I would open the grammar workbooks and I would instantly wilt because I kept thinking, how often do I parse sentences as an adult? And when did I do it, and when was it meaningful for me? So this is the way to start really changing how you think about homeschool. Don't simply look for a set of standards and then do them to your kids. That's not fun. Nobody likes that. Start with, what was my experience? How did I ever interact with that information? How has that information been meaningful to me? Or, why isn't it meaningful? And man, what a ripoff. You can ask that question. So when I looked at grammar, I realized I'm an excellent writer. I've studied foreign languages and have managed to speak them conversationally, fluently. And I have worked as a copy editor at public, like for magazines and books. So clearly, I have a strong enough grasp of grammar to do some pretty important jobs in my life that relate to language. So what was the value of parsing sentences? When was diagramming meaningful? Or was it ever? And how precise does my understanding of English grammar need to be to teach my kids to read, to write, to grow up and be successful orators, presenters, foreign language learners? So when I started with that question, I backed away from traditional curricula. Because traditional curricula act like grammar is something you do to children. Like grammar is something you foist on them against their will. Like, I don't know, they didn't ever realize they needed it, but suddenly we're going to make them learn it because there's some vague idea that if they don't learn it, they won't be considered educated adults. And yet, you talk to most adults like I do on the phone, in email every day, and they all tell me they don't remember grammar. It's a very rare person who says, oh yeah, I've got grammar dialed. Most people say, I don't know what to use because I never really learned it myself. In fact, I've even had parents say to me that when they start working on grammar books with their kids, they still don't get it. So even though they're sitting there sort of like the blind leading the blind, they still don't get it. So why are we doing grammar? You got to start with that question. You can't start with what's the best program. You got to start with the question, why is grammar valuable? What role does it fill in the life of an educated person? And that's the question that changed how I taught. Because when I first began writing The Writer's Jungle, I was young, I was in my 30s, and I actually began with what's a paragraph and started writing what I thought a paragraph was. I got partway through my own writing, like a page in, and I was like, gosh, this is horrible. I never think about any of these things when I'm writing. Why would I then think that all the people who are going to read my book want to think about these things when they're writing? And then I backed away and I realized a couple of things. First, an understanding of grammar is natural to native speakers. They learn it by ear. And our goal is to enrich the ear, give them more to listen to, Like if the only thing you'd ever heard from music was Old MacDonald Had a Farm, and you're like, well, I've heard music, I studied Old MacDonald Had a Farm. There's a lot more music out there than just a little nursery rhyme style song for children. And sometimes that's how grammar workbooks operate, as though the most interesting thing is what's a noun, what's an adjective, what's a verb. But that's not what grammar is about. Grammar is about the structure of thought expressed in language. Grammar is about the way we represent ourselves in language. And it varies language to language. And we become more and more skilled in our use of our own language, the wider range of reading we include in our lives. So we need to include voices that are not like ours. We need to include sophisticated voices, yes, but also include voices that are simply from other language communities, whether it is people who write poetry or people who live in different states or different countries. We do that auditorially, listening to YouTube, watching TV, movies, but we also do it through reading billboards, knock-knock jokes, nursery rhymes, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, rap, poetry. Every kind of self-expression in writing enriches the ear. We learn new grammatical constructions every time we do it. And when we're talking about figuring out the names for the parts of speech in language, wouldn't it be better to not just assign this abstraction to a word and instead look at the way words hang together and what they do when they bump up against each other? And then think about the categories that we could assign these words so that we understand that sometimes a word in a sentence means one thing, but in another sentence, it gets used in an entirely different way. You know, my favorite one to talk about is the word table. When we say table in English, people always assume that it's a noun, but it's not necessarily a noun. It could be a verb. I table the discussion, right? And we say things like tabletop. How does that affect the word table? Now it's like an adjective. We keep changing the role it plays in a sentence. And when we change the role, we change the part of speech. So grammar isn't just about accuracy and making sure you know the difference between lie and lay. Grammar is about understanding the power of communication in language. And we need to ask better questions about it. Why are verbs important in language? Not there's a verb. When we talk about verbs in Brave Writer, we talk about powerful verbs. There's a huge difference between saying, I have a dress, and I am wearing a dress, and I am living the dress. There are ways to expand how we represent ourselves in speech, and each one creates more and more impact. We're always looking for impact. And you can talk about impact better when you know the categories for language. But we aren't ever talking about impact when we study grammar, are we? Are we? Well, the last time I checked, most grammar workbooks are just about accurate parsing. It doesn't make me feel more powerful in my writing at all. In fact, poetry is my favorite way to think about grammar because poetry deliberately subverts your expectations with how language is used. That noise is on my computer. Hold on. Oh! I wanted to stop the noise and instead spilled milk. Okay, keep going. So grammar is not just about parsing the words. It is about making a greater impact with communication. It's about power in language, okay? So when you are looking at any subject area, find out where the power lives. That's what you're doing in homeschool, right? Like you didn't stop once somebody gave you a textbook curriculum, a box curriculum. Was that the end of the search? No, because to stay engaged with this lifelong journey with your kids, you had to have more skin in the game. You had to have something that animated you and drew you forward and made you want to keep going. And you know what that is? Power. The power source of learning. You keep wanting more power. And so you keep trying to find the tools that create more power in learning. Well, do that for your kids. Let them in on that search and help them hook up power in learning. Ask better questions, right? Ask better questions, not which math book is good. Why are we learning math? What's the power of calculating? What's it for? And have your kids help you figure it out. It would be really interesting to just walk around your life, maybe for a week, and take notes on all the ways you use math that you don't think about it. Like right now, I'm looking at the number of live viewers that keeps going up and down. That's one way. That tells me how many people have shown up and whether or not this is a successful Facebook Live. That's one way. When I woke up this morning, there was the number that told me what time it was. I looked at my phone and I saw the number that told me what date it was. I've already used math this morning and I've ignored it, right? I boiled water. Water had to get to a certain temperature for me to pour it into my teapot. That's another way that I used math this morning. If you kept track of all the ways math showed up in your lives naturally before you went to the workbook about calculating, you would actually have much more interest in calculating, because suddenly your kids and you would be on an adventure that says, how does math bring power to our lives? How are we able to enjoy life more and be more successful as living, breathing human beings because of math? How's math showing up? You put in a new light bulb and you're like, oh, this is a 40 watt. Oh, but it's not very bright. Let's try 60 watt. Well, why is 60 brighter than 40? Why is 100 brighter than 60? Well, is it just because the number is bigger? Isn't the number a random abstraction we're assigning to light bulbs? How do they decide on these numbers? What is a watt? Why do numbers, when they go up, always make us think of more? And is that the way they should have assigned light bulbs? You can ask these questions. This is how you start to create engagement. You start looking at your own experience, looking at the world around you, and asking better questions. And you're doing it all the time with homeschool. You're asking better questions all the time. And you can be sharing those goals, those questions, this process with your children. And they will now know that the family is on a shared learning adventure when you do. All right, we are at our 35-minute mark, so we're going to end today. If you have any thoughts or questions about this Facebook Live, post them in the comments. I'm not exactly sure where they are, but post them. I read them all, and I will be happy to answer questions. We will meet back again tomorrow at 8 a.m. here for day 35. It's a little bit longer. It's good talk, and we will talk about it. Somebody asked earlier, oh my gosh, thank you, Lisa, for having the Gracious Space books be in your library. That's a wonderful idea. I wish more people would do that. That's fantastic. But what someone asked about Gracious Space Winter, we will start that when this book is finished. So there are 50 essays in each book, and right now we just did day 34. So tomorrow is day 35, called Stay the Course, and we'll just keep rolling until we get to 50. And then my guess is it'll be winter break, so we'll have a nice break, and then we'll start the winter process. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. Live honestly, write bravely, go find the power in what you're learning and teaching. Have a great day, everyone.